Mii Game has its fair share of awful mechanics, which is why I think Miitopia is a peculiar RPG. So many of its mechanics are generally considered blasphemy in modern RPG design, from the menus to the basic structure of a battle, and while this makes it unique, it also includes one mechanic so terrible that players are tempted to drop it surprisingly often. When people discuss Miitopia, they have a tendency to speak subjectively, such as I loved it or it was fun. The way people see it, Miitopia is fantastic through charm and dialogue first, often as a result of all the different gags across your character's journey and the ability to cast whoever you want in whichever role you desire, unless it's the Greek mage, because you're seemingly forced to pick between Jesus and Gandalf. Spicy people will even slip in Merlin. Battles are kept fun because they are quick and heaps of shenanigans shenanigate during them. Mii's using skills to help or fight each other, the unruly chaos going on before your eyes, and Chef's deciding your party shouldn't be friends anymore till they become MVP of every single battle after reaching level 15. And this chaos is primarily amusing because the game features a colloquially hated mechanic as one of the cores shaping its battle system. As you know, RPG games such as Final Fantasy or Paper Mario in the younger years of the Double O's hint on this little thing you might have heard of called strategy. It's also in the name that players will take the role of the main character, you know? The RP in RPG stands for role-playing, which really makes you wonder as a side effect why exactly we call them RPG games, since that's basically saying role-playing games. The point is, players in RPGs love agency. That means the ability to achieve progress towards a certain goal. The game will provide tools and let you employ them in hopefully smart plans, essentially asking you to build a strategy. It should also pick your common prior strategies and make mechanics that complicate or invalidate the easy answers. There's one frequent reason why the original Persona 3 is often criticized. You cannot directly influence what your party members do. You simply instruct them on their battle style and watch Marin Karen fail for the millionth time. Your party is a resource given to you, but then by deliberately limiting your control over them, they attempted to make the characters feel independent for the story purpose at the cost of fairness. It comes off as frustrating. I mean, though people often dislike the mechanic, the designers never neglected it though, particularly during the infamous Answer DLC, where you'll be required to systematically alter your party's behaviors, something which I wishfully imagine doing in real life daily since no one ever leaves pizza for me at parties. The deal is, users were never thought about this in the main game, as it was rather unnecessary, leading players to believe the enemy arrangements were incredibly awkward. In the main game, at most, you'd ask them to conserve MP and be cruising outside of bosses. AI will naturally target the enemy's weakness and such, but the DLC battles ensure having, say, one enemy whose elemental weakness is simultaneously reflected by another, making it the player's task to spot this and adapt their party's members' behavior to prevent attacks targeting multiple foes, for example. Then players who spend dozens of hours underusing the system will naturally find it unfair. I mean, everyone plays games to get away from life, which is simply unfair. We do not need further reminders. So although the designers knew their intention, a failure in communication with the player led to less enjoyable gameplay. This may appear like a random rant, but trust me, it will be relevant later. I'm always relevant later. The only filler I deliver is ironically this joke. You should remember that great mechanics, particularly those that are often relevant to later parts of the game, will be perceived as lousy game design by players lacking enough information. Now, Miitopia takes away any and all player agency to them battles by disallowing control of their party. Oftentimes, they will act on their own, typically disturbing your expected reaction to a situation. This little detail that would easily be a massive issue in other games is actually one of those examples of Miitopia using quote-unquote bad mechanics to deliver a heavy load of the game's thick, warm appeal. The game is searching to avoid the player abusing a singular working strategy, sometimes kicking off party members, sometimes separating them, rarely even forcing them into quarrels. And since this creates variety and fun, people who jive with it just probably don't mind. Your party members being an incoherent team by having them ignore the player's input was a design focus, and it wouldn't be the same if they never brought back a Friskeloid Forger figurine when you sent them out to get better equipment. But the fact remains, these mechanics suck under any other circumstances, and an analysis of this size, maybe even one longer, is required to explain it. And I sincerely doubt folks have just under 4 minutes to spare on me. I guess you're the exception, buddy. You're so neat. Let's be friends. Not all features in Miitopia are this lucky though. Some are intended to spin on unloved mechanics, but some others serve narrative purposes or take a moment to get going. One of such mechanics being atrocious enough to demotivate people from playing entirely, and it's not a limited availability from 2:30 PM to 4:30 PM and 9 PM to 11 PM. Thankfully, that's some of that quest exclusive. This is a feature that is early enough in the game, yet at an unusual spot, located at a place where players expect to move on to the next area after 3 to 6 hours of gameplay, about 25% through. At this point, the game fades to a cutscene depicting your team members getting kidnapped by the antagonist and doing this to the building, which we have no idea what it is, but scientists and researchers are pretty confident that the Dark Lord did not touch any no-no parts. Then the character wakes up to hear they have returned to level 1, is alone, and cannot select the class they previously selected, effectively wiping your progress entirely except for gains obtained by grubbing. This is an extremely hard hit for most players, because it basically invalidates hours of progress. This is Minecraft deciding to blow up your base for no reason, or the player obliviously saving in the ice cream factory in Vice City. Maybe even like that one time in 2004 where Sony released a holiday demo of Beautiful Joe 2 that deleted every save file in your PS2 memory card for no absolute reason. It feels unfair and invalidates the feeling of success you had a moment prior after finishing the first world, worsened by how little recognition the game makes of it. You get a cutscene with your teammates saying they'll trust you'll save them eventually, and the very next level the protagonist acts like nothing happened, even using quotes that refer to having a party after a battle. Now, losing progress arbitrarily is frustrating, but that's not exactly why the mechanic is icky. After all, it spaces out the creation of the final 10 character party so that the late game aspects can attain the desired complexity. It's the way the players perceive it that makes it bad. Quitting. How do you do it? I am somehow not giving up on content creation and I continue getting munches at 3 AM. In gaming, most studios in frustration distinguish quitting by two categories: micro-quitting and straight-up quitting. The primary difference between these being the thought process behind deciding to stop. There is a difference between being tilted at the towers and an overarching perception that the overall experience will become unpleasant after specific events. Consider why they are quitting, particularly when they attribute the blame to the game. So, let's say you just lost a game of Minecraft Hunger. God damn it, it's 2024, I forget. You just lost a game of PUBG Battlegrounds by the old caps. What got you so shook? And you get pissed off, tossing the controller. Now, first off, skill issue. Second off, you'll evaluate potential improvement. If it's a minor thing, you'll even period off pretending it won't continue biting you in the ass for months. Upon analysis of your situation, I noticed a direct correlation between the rage fit and external factors being blamed for the failing. External factors such as the game or other players, like spikes or a disruptive teammate, may create anger and the perception of powerlessness. This explains why you don't lash as often in single player games. The failure is a result of your inability. Even when the game is hard and you get huffy after blundering towards the end of a level. What is that sound? What is that noise? What is that noise? As I was saying, even when the game is hard and you get huffy after blundering towards the end of a level, you can admit I was right calling skill issue earlier and recognize it. This is potentially why less people retire on Dark Souls than on Remnant from the Ashes, if how long to beat is to be trusted after the chainsaw incident. The longer you consider the fault wasn't yours, the more frustration accumulates. You'll quit, think about it, and begin wondering if returning is worthwhile. Heck, if amending a mistake is appealing, returning to the challenge may even appear fun. Therefore, when you lose progress due to a brief cutscene initiated by the game, the natural inclination is to attribute blame to the game itself, and its method to address the situation is through minor dialogue. One time. Here's the deal. Hurting players over in-game events is not a mistake. Games where you have a body like The Last Guardian or Mario and Luigi RPGs have a sequence separating both characters dividing the moveset in half. Those games deliberately include elements into the level design that were impossible until you're reunited. And then you get like 10 extra coins from that, but hey, at least Mario isn't morphing into a bean today and that truly does change everything. You don't always need to be so clever about your acknowledgement. Even when your characters die near the conclusion of plenty RPGs, reminding the player that it's either a critical moment or temporary is enough for them to avoid the motivation. If players are aware that they can recover from their loss over time, the impact is less poignant. Same if it's already at the end, so who cares? And if the game includes a narrative element, they'll often deal to the motivation state of the playable character. The thing is, sometimes limiting players while setting up the core gameplay loop is inevitable, but introducing certain elements may not always naturally occur. Miitopia hinges on holding 10 party members, which is more friends than I'll ever have. Without imposing any limitation on the player's utilization of the initial gang, there is no compelling reason to select new classes and characters, given more potent Miis exist in your team. This is in virtue of the first 4 worlds and the later 8 owning different gameplay loops, the second half being more free form and introducing larger side quests. The true form of the game's intended design. Everyone knows how important hyper sprinkles can be, yet you only unlock them after the whole party reassembles in Word Fall. Also, you don't have a fucking dragon until then! A fucking dragon, I tell you! And I explain this mostly to express how fundamental the issue is. It's a decision made explicitly for the convenience of the game's later flow and funny potential. That's totally what we certified game developers totally call it, and that can be certainly tricky. It's not very often that you can use a game's narrative strength to the advantage of its design. Usually it's the opposite. You use design to transmit narrative. Problem being that narratives and game mechanics will progress in different ways. You can take steps back on a narrative, as in having a character lose motivation or forget a lesson they had learned prior, but you can't as comfortably do it regarding gameplay progression. There's always exceptions, but as a general rule, you don't make level 10 easier than level 2, whether that's regarding straight difficulty or the complexity of a mechanic's usage. Since the challenge is less, players are likely to find it boring. Simply put, an issue so elementary to the concept will only be fixed under a complete rework, reminiscent of my sleeping habits. Granted, most people don't drop the game right away, but rather slightly into Next Door. The gameplay similarities between Greenhorn and Next Door are too many. I think blocking sprinkles or giving the player new opportunities would help smooth out the transition. It's not just the losing of your team that is problematic, but also the feeling of repetition it produces as a result. So if Miitopia wanted to mend this, they possess two potential routes. Hey wait, I need to follow you into them! Two routes. There's technically a third one, where you overhaul the entire game concept, so battles require your entire party to need systematic swapping depending on the challenge. Picking foes in next door, kick your buttocks like you're a turkey, kill a member with the skill set to bash them joints. Elemental attacks? What does that mean? There's two feasible routes that don't alter the basic game, which are the mechanical and the narrative one. If the game merely acknowledged the player's loneliness, it would become part of the journey, recognizing that yes, you're alone, but your bodies can be recovered later. That last detail is attempted by showing a cutscene with your disoriented friends, but it would be far more ingenious to actually establish the distance between you and Carcaton, making the event further motivation for attacking the Dark Lord. The first one is the most neglected though, taking advantage of the desert setting. How about your character wandering alone amidst a sandstorm for that first level? They get faint, prompting a new member to rescue them and cheer them up. It's the sort of narrative detail that would logically connect the dots for players. Granted, that wouldn't remove it entirely due to the underlying mechanical issue, which would involve giving the player more tools they didn't have before, changing combat feel towards a different direction. There is one mechanical change that Nintendo implemented to at least bridge the gap on the aggressiveness of the problem. Horns. The Switch version added the horse, which allows you to keep at least a pseudo party member and a relationship. This makes the transition a lot less abrupt, as the game no longer needs to recognize the character's loneliness, cause like, they're not alone. There's also the easy answer, where they just rebalance the entire game so that the enemies in next door are harder, and then you get stronger party members as a default in next door, but also kinda like they have to change the level cap to be 99 instead of 50, because but that would be much more easier than like remaking the whole game. It's just a giant rebalance, which wouldn't have been meant to do for a remake, but come on. You get a horse. You get a horse in the game. You get a horse. This harps back to what I mentioned earlier. A notable side of the issue is that despite the mechanics benefits for the second portion of the game, players won't naturally perceive either the bigger picture or the benefits. Sometimes solid mechanics are not portrayed correctly, turning them into fatal flaws. And it sucks for Miitopia on the 3DS, since ample portions of buyers never got to experience some of the game's comedy gold, like getting beat up by a beat up nose or encountering the hot lizard guys with a whole face for eyes, which makes them substantially less sexy. And I'm glad the Switch remaster helped dull down the frustration from the unfair mechanic, because as far as worst mechanics in games go, Miitopia's is not half bad. It has some positives that you wouldn't imagine, and the mechanic itself isn't the issue compared to its delivery. Honestly, Miitopia is a clean game from start to finish that was an unsung gem of the Nintendo 3DS catalog for a few years. Its unique nature and subversive use of RPG tropes make it inimitable, and the Switch version does wonders getting it to more people while improving its worst aspects, outright adding a safe spot a boss dungeon I was itching for. It additionally leaves the door open for a sequel with even more unhinged mechanics. Miitopia ain't perfect, but damn does it have a premium supply of charm, and at some point it was special to us earlier fans, because it really made us feel like the lucky ones, those who didn't mind Miitopia's worst mechanic. Also, the announcement of the remake is solely to blame for my only video that has performed well in the channel.